Imagine being told you're not good enough to hold the rifle you trained your whole life to master. Imagine standing in a room full of men who laugh at you, dismiss you as weak, and throw you out like trash, until the day you pull off something so impossible that even the four-star general who mocked you stands frozen, unable to breathe. This is not just a story. This is a reckoning. Stay with me till the end, and make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what's about to happen will leave you speechless. The humiliation. It all began on a biting cold morning at Fort Bragg, the kind of morning where frost clung to the ground like shards of glass and the air tasted like steel. The U.S. Army's elite sniper qualification trials were underway, a crucible meant to forge legends or break spirits, and among the towering walls of muscle and camouflage walked Captain Arya Kane, a figure so out of place in their eyes that whispers chased her like shadows. Her frame was lean, almost delicate compared to the hulking men who could bench press half a truck, and yet her gait carried the stillness of a hunter who had seen more death than these boys could imagine. The armory buzzed with tension, the metallic tang of gun oil mixing with the earthy scent of boot leather, and then the doors swung wide. Enter General Mason Cole, a man whose chest glittered with ribbons, whose voice rolled like distant artillery. "Gentlemen," he began, pausing, theatrically before his ice-blue eyes sliced toward Arya. "And, lady." His smirk was a blade, and laughter erupted like gunfire. "Today you'll prove you're worthy of the Barrett. Fail, and you pack your bags." The Barrett M82 stood on the rack like a god among weapons, a .50 caliber beast that could tear through engines and walls alike, a weapon of judgment that weighed more than arrogance. And the rules? Brutal. 3 shots, 3 kills at 1,500 meters. No excuses. When Arya's name was called, the floor seemed to tilt under the weight of sneers. "She can't even lift that thing," someone hissed. Another chuckled. "Bet she quits after the first shot." Even the general joined in the chorus of doubt. "Captain Kane," he said loudly, for every ear to savor, "if you so much as scratch the paint on my Barrett, I'll have you cleaning latrines until your next life." But Arya? She just nodded, silent as a graveyard at midnight. They didn't know that silence was her war cry. She stepped forward, hands steady, muscles coiled like steel cables beneath her sleeves, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The Barrett roared in her grip, a thunderclap that split the earth, and when the smoke cleared, the target lay dead center, the red dot obliterated in a mist of shredded paint. A second shot followed, sliding into the same wound like a blade twisting in a heart. The third completed the trinity, 3 rounds forming a single black hole on the paper of fate. Silence slammed the room. Even the wind outside seemed to die. The general's smirk melted, his jaw grinding like gears stripped of teeth. But ego is a stubborn beast. "Fluke," he barked, clinging to denial like a drowning man to driftwood. "Anyone can get lucky once." He turned away, dismissing her with a wave, but inside, a seed of unease had rooted deep in his gut. Because men like him, men who had clawed their way up the iron ladder of power, knew instinctively when they'd just witnessed something unnatural. What he didn't know was that Arya Kane wasn't there to impress him. She wasn't there for glory or validation. She was there because someone had unleashed a game no one was supposed to play, a game only she could win, or the world would burn, the secret test that night. Long after the sun bled out behind the pines and darkness draped itself over the base, like a sniper's ghillie suit, Arya sat alone in the barracks, stripping and cleaning her rifle with the meticulous grace of a surgeon. Every click, every slide of oiled steel was a lullaby to her soul, but her calm was a mask. Inside, storms raged. The general's humiliation wasn't the end. It was the opening salvo. She knew men like him. They didn't forgive. They plotted. And sure enough, at 0200 hours, The summons came. A curt knock, a voice like gravel. "Captain Kane, report to Hangar 6. Now." She moved without a word, boots whispering over concrete, eyes scanning the shadows. Hangar 6 was a tomb of steel and silence, the kind of place where secrets went to die. Inside waited General Cole, flanked by two officers whose eyes glittered like predators. On a table lay a file stamped classified in blood-red ink. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You embarrassed me today," he said, voice coiled with venom. "That doesn't happen in my army. So here's your chance to prove you're not just a sideshow." He slid the file toward her, and when she opened, her pulse stuttered. Inside were satellite photos, maps scrawled with kill zones, and one chilling word: Vulture. An enemy sniper, a ghost in human skin who had dropped more NATO officers than any terrorist alive. His calling card? A single shot to the left eye, from distances that made ballisticians weep. "3 teams have tried," the general said, his smirk reborn like a snake shedding skin. 3 teams are dead. You want your precious career? You want that Barrett to mean something? Take him out. You leave in 6 hours. He thought she'd falter, thought her courage would crack under the weight of an impossible mission. But Arya just closed the file, her face carved from stone. Because what he didn't know was that this wasn't her first dance with Vulture. He wasn't just a target, he was a ghost from her past, a shadow that had stalked her across deserts and mountains, a devil she thought she'd buried in blood. And now fate had dragged him back into the light. But as she walked out into the freezing night, something gnawed at her bones. This wasn't just a mission, it was a setup. And she knew one thing with chilling certainty. In a game of ghosts, trust is a bullet waiting for a chamber. The 3,200-meter shot. The mountains rose like jagged teeth under a sky bruised with storm clouds as Arya crawled through the snow, her breath misting in the bitter air. Every nerve burned with the weight of the Barrett on her back, every heartbeat a drum counting down to doomsday. The op was simple on paper: infiltrate, locate, eliminate. But nothing about Vulture was simple. He was a phantom who moved like smoke, who turned hunters into corpses before they even knew they were prey. And now, he was out there, somewhere, beyond the ridges, his rifle an unblinking eye of death. Hours bled into eternity as Arya inched toward her perch, belly scraping ice, lungs screaming. At last, she nestled into the crook of a frozen ledge, the world sprawling below in a white hush. She unpacked the Barrett, her fingers numb, her soul locked in a predator's trance. The rangefinder blinked numbers that made the blood drain from her face. 3,200 meters. No one had ever made that shot outside theory, not in these winds, not in this hell. But failure wasn't an option. Through the scope, the world narrowed to a tunnel of fate. And then she saw him. A flicker of movement, a silhouette carved. Against snow, the glint of glass where his scope kissed the light. Vulture. The ghost had a face again. Time slowed, syrup thick. Arya's breathing fell into the rhythm of eternity. The sniper's heartbeat, where the universe shrinks to crosshairs and destiny hums in the trigger. She compensated for wind, for Coriolis, for the spin of the damned earth. And then, with a whisper softer than sin, she squeezed. The Barrett roared, a god's verdict cracking the heavens, and the world seemed to hold its breath as the bullet rode the wind, a silver serpent slashing through snow and silence. 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then, a blossom of red bloomed on white, distant as a dying star. The legend of Vulture ended with his left eye kissing oblivion. But there was no triumph, no roar of victory. Because as she packed up, something cold coiled in her gut. A second scope glinted in the trees, another phantom, another game. And the shot that split the air next wasn't hers. The general's frozen stare and the twist. She woke to darkness, iron biting her wrists, blood crusting her temple. The room smelled of oil and betrayal. And then the lights blazed. And there he was, General Mason Cole, his smirk a scar across his face. "You did well, Captain," he purred, circling like a wolf. "Too well. You killed Vulture, and in doing so, made yourself the most dangerous sniper alive. And that makes you inconvenient." The truth hit like shrapnel. This wasn't a mission. It was a purge. They had sent her to die, to erase a woman who shattered their glass fortress of male supremacy. "But don't worry," he sneered. "History won't remember you." He raised his pistol, a black hole yawning in her vision. And then the world erupted. The door blew inward in a hurricane of fire and steel, and men fell like wheat. Out of the smoke strode figures in midnight. Gear, faces hidden, weapons singing death. One of them cut her chains, his voice a rasp of iron. "Orders from the top, ma'am. You're coming with us." Days later, in a safe house buried in the bones of the Rockies, Arya held a badge in her hand, heavier than any rifle, engraved with words that turned her blood to ice. Black Spear Unit, eyes beyond the horizon. A ghost army, answerable to no flag, no law, but their own. And she was their new queen. When General Mason Cole received the report, when he saw the photo of her alive wearing that badge, he froze, because the badge bore numbers no sniper had ever earned, 3,200 meters. Confirmed. And beneath it, 2 words that would haunt him to his grave. Game over.